Your cadences suck, and no one's going to tell you that. But me and David Kreiger are going to walk through 4 amazing steps that you need to know, which will revolutionize your cadence. So it's a pleasure to have my good friend David Kreiger back here with me. And as I mentioned there in my little shocking statement, my attention-grabbing hook, which maybe you use in your cold emails, we'd like to arm you with a couple of things for your cadences that maybe you don't use. And maybe if you're just sat there thinking, well, I've done a call, now I'll do an email, and that's my cadence. Well, there are a few other things that you might consider, which we'd like to tell you about today. So David, welcome to the stage. Good to see you again. How you doing?
Very good. Always great to be with you, Ollie. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. You're back by popular demand, as is pretty much always the case when we have you on. So nice to have you back. So help me out here a little bit. There's a couple of ground rules I want to very quickly get into in a second, but cadences mean a lot of things, and I'm sure that you, particularly with the type of work you do, I'm sure you're asked, so what's the best cadence, or what do you think of my cadence? And it's a pretty vague and arbitrary question, that, isn't it? There's a lot to it. So how do you begin to answer those things and draw your own ideas of, well, I could try this and I could try that, because everybody's kind of tried everything in a different way, haven't they?
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's standard cadences, and you're always going to have your basic cadence, which has your calls, your emails, LinkedIn touch. And at SalesRoads, we really do lean into the calls. We think that a lot of times cadences, you're hiding behind some emails or social, because it's easier than doing the cold calls. And so we found our cadences are really very, very phone heavy, just because we really believe in trying to engage with people. And having conversations, and it's hard to do it if you don't pick up the phone and get them talking. That doesn't mean there isn't a place to complement with email and well-crafted email and well-crafted LinkedIn. And so I think that the standard cadence is going to include those three methodologies. We do really lean in again on the phone, but some of the things we'll talk about today, and there's times and place for all this, but I think the more creative you can be and the more you can lean into incorporating people into your cadences. And we'll talk about what that means a bit, to really sort of break through the clutter and become relevant with your prospects. Because if you just have a standard cadence, you're not going to necessarily stand out. And so we'll talk about some of the things that I've personally tried and that we've leveraged that allows you to really incorporate a more human aspect into your cadences.
Cool. I love it. Okay. I have a very quick piece of housekeeping. Is the word that I was trying to think of there, and it just wouldn't come out. Just for everybody who's watching. So we always get asked, hey, when's the recording, or will there be a recording? Yeah. So if you're watching right now, if you're not already way after the fact, and this is not already way in the future, you will be sent the recording tomorrow. And feel free to share it with whoever you'd like to. We're more than happy for everybody to watch. And that is basically it. Beyond, if you have a question for me or David, of course, at the end, we'll give you our contact details or where you can find us. But hit us both up, and we're happy to help you out. So, David and I brainstormed 4 or so key points. We may go down some rabbit holes. I'm not promising that we stay to 4. But the first one David wanted to bring up was incorporating, and this was a debate we had just before we went live here. I said gifting, and he said, no, giving or helping. So I think we mean similar, but there is a fundamental difference there, isn't there? So help us understand what do those 3 mean, and then how do we incorporate that into our cadence? What are you thinking about?
Yeah. So the reason why I push back on gifting is people do incorporate gifting into their cadence, and sending could be corporate swag or could be something that's a little bit more personal, hopefully. But I think that's done with a little bit of a different mindset than what I think is really important and can allow you to stand out and really build your network, which might not result in immediate sales, but will result in goodwill and relationships that over time will lead into things that will be beneficial for you. And so I think that sometimes people don't think about just how can I help? How can I incorporate into my cadence or my outreach how can I help? And I actually advocate, and I posted about this recently, having a KPI of helpfulness for your sales reps, right? So trying to think about one way you can help somebody every single day. So this can incorporate gifting, but it's done in a different mindset. And if you can think about it in a way that you are not even really looking for anything necessarily in return, it will land that much better. And so just to give you two examples, there was an individual that we had sold to, and we went up against with one of our competitors, and we lost the deal. But what I would really advocate is having a cadence for everybody who you've lost, but not necessarily following up and saying, have you reconsidered? Are things not going well? But just keeping in touch and seeing if there's ways that you can help them. Either maybe they have questions about, what you're doing for us is outbound prospecting and things like that they're posting on social. Or in this case, this person eventually was looking for a new job. And I reached out and I gave a few different introductions to them. None of them necessarily panned out, and they eventually landed in a new job. And then I was one of the first calls. And they called and they wanted to engage with us because it hadn't gone so well with their competitor. But I had just found a way and a methodology to stay relevant with that person and be helpful. And that paid back. Just recently too, Josh Braun, who many people know, is very helpful in my mindset and the things that I do. And one of my reps had actually posted in Slack some knowledge that she had learned from Josh Braun just about keeping your mindset in a certain way. And so I just sent him a book with a little handwritten note and said, thank you so much for everything that you give to the community, to my reps. Here's something I think could be helpful to you. I'm never going to sell Josh Braun. He doesn't need SDR outsourcing services, but I just thought it would be nice to reach out and give back a little bit and be helpful to him. And he posted on LinkedIn that if David Kreiger ever wanted a demo with me, I would take it 100%. Now, again, I'm not selling Josh Braun anything. I don't need a demo with him, but just to give you a sense of how powerful being helpful is in a cadence, I think is pretty profound.
Yeah, that's a great story. It sounds like you should make a software and cash in that demo with Josh at some point. But what I will say, I know that this is true and it doesn't surprise me. I didn't know that you did that as part of your cadences at times when it's relevant. But I've sought you out a bunch of times to say, I have a close friend who is looking for a job, and maybe somebody and you've taken a call with them or things like that. And that is I think you have to be resourceful is one thing before that you can try to be helpful, but if you have no resource, you can't particularly always be helpful. You can try, which is one thing, but you have a great network, which enables you to do that side of it. You can also do the book sometimes if that's appropriate. So there's various levels to that, but there is also, there'll be processes or mechanisms where, organic things like your reps posting in Slack that they learn something. That doesn't happen all the time, but when it happens, that's a great trigger to use. Otherwise, that person in the deal changing jobs, I'm sure maybe you heard from them direct, or you saw it on LinkedIn somehow, some way, maybe Sales Navigator. So tracking things like that, it kind of gives you might not see them all organically all the time. You kind of need process to back that up too, right?
Yeah. So, I think there's a few different things. One, and because this is about cadences, putting people that you wanted to stay in touch with in a cadence. And a cadence doesn't have to be 8 touches in a month, right? It can be 8 touches in a year. It can be 4 touches in a year, right? We think in short term. That's one of the problems. Sorry, I'm just getting over a little bit of a cold here. But I think sometimes in sales, we think a little too short term, right? Because we're trying to hit our monthly quota, our quarterly quota. But I think the best sales reps think long term. And so a cadence, just coming back to this, in my own personal CRM, I have, a group of people that I just want to keep in touch with. In my cadence, some of them it's quarterly, some of it's yearly, right? And you just keep in touch with them over time. And in Navigator, absolutely, you put them in, and I have like old clients and things like that. So it can come up, and it can be an organic cadence in some ways when somebody's looking for a job, or somebody, posts something or something like that. But I think in those cadences, when you aren't necessarily trying to sell them, is when you can build those relationships best. And it always comes back. Not always. I mean, in the grand scheme, it makes you feel good, right? Even if you're not, if it doesn't help you. So I think that one of the big points in this first part of the cadence is not just thinking transactionally in your cadence and thinking about how you can help, but think long term. Create cadences of all the people who might be able to be good referrals over time, or just old people in your network, and just put them into a cadence to keep in touch with them, whether it's a quarterly basis, a monthly basis, a yearly basis, and then reach out either, to see how you can help them in their career or personally, or just, pay them a compliment, or just say, I'd love to keep in touch. I remember, X and X that we did together, and I'd love to just catch up. And so I think thinking that long-term will pay dividends for people.
Totally. Yeah. And likewise, I do something similar. I think I haven't even thought of it as a cadence in actual fact, but when I see people do work that I admire, I will forward it to them and say, like, that email was really cool. In my opinion, like I like the GIF or whatever it was, or the LinkedIn post that has a really good email framework. I'll just share the post as a direct message to them and say, "That's cool. I'll give that a shot. Thanks for putting that up," or whatever it is, as you see it, as best you can. That I have probably an unconscious group who I do that to, who I remain in touch with at least semi regularly, kind of like you said. But for your prospects, again, as long as you mechanize the way that you can find that information, because you're not always going to see their posts come up, or you might miss it. Or if you're on vacation, you miss their job announcement or whatever it is. As long as you can catch that, then you can always find a way to say, oh, that's great. Like, they got a new job. Maybe A, congrats, and B, they got promotion. So maybe the great book that I read 2 weeks ago would also apply to them. I'll send them that. All of that can come to your mind when you catch that mechanism. So I like that one a lot.
And here's the one other just little tip that I found is helpful is obviously we have our professional CRM, but I would advocate for people to have their personal CRM. I use a CRM called clay.earth, which integrates with my LinkedIn, with my email, and I can put in these cadences, talk to them, on a quarterly basis. It syncs who I've had meetings with. It will suggest people for me to reach out to. And so I think it is really important to nurture your network in this way and have a mechanism, even if your manager is saying this is your cadence and this is what you need. You have your own personal cadence of people that aren't necessarily going to transact this month, but you just want to keep in touch with.
Totally. Okay. So I'm looking at our notes and I'm getting ready for our second topic. Is there any final thoughts, or should we move on?
Just be helpful. It will come back to you.
It probably will. And, there's no timing for that, but that's how it works. So our second point here for must-haves in your cadence. So I'm going to paraphrase here a little bit. When you get in touch with the executive assistant, it could be a gatekeeper, could be, there's multiple names for this. Trying to tell them, hey, could you connect my call? Oftentimes you get met with that resistance. So David's got something where he's trying to flip that factor into a, oh, sure. And they're happy to send along a message. So how do we do that?
So first, I'm going to take a mini step back. And here's the other part of just thinking about your cadence and thinking about your touches is the more that you can incorporate the human element or other people into the cadence. We think again, okay, well, I've got this prospect. I need to get in touch with them. I need to email them. I need to call them. And that's fine. But if there are other ways to sort of engage with them through a human aspect, the more effective you're going to be. And so some of my reps stumbled upon this and they've used it very successfully. So they will try somebody, they can't get a hold of them, they are sending an email, and then they will, we all know about befriending the gatekeeper and hopefully they'll put you through, but they do one thing even more than that. They befriend them and they ask them, I've emailed so-and-so, I haven't heard back. Would you mind just checking to make sure that they got the email? And you'll be surprised if you are doing it in the nice way that you've built a relationship. uh, what we've found is that gatekeeper, that executive assistant will sometimes walk over to the desk and say, "Did you get David Kreiger's email? He just sent it." And now all of a sudden, you have a human coming in and advocating for you and asking if they've sent it and calling attention. And so we found that that's been really successful. It's the way that you deliver it. You've got to, can't be demanding. You've got to befriend them. But we've used it time and time again and then you actually get a reply for your email, or that person says, just put them through. And so it's thinking about ways that you can think a little differently in your cadence. And literally my team is in their cadence, leveraging a person in that building to go walk over and talk to their prospect for you.
Wow. So I'm picturing person walks over to the desk and they say, "Oh, sorry, David, I've got Ollie on the phone. He says that they've just sent you an email. I just wanted to check you got it." And you go immediately to your inbox. You see my name, click open. I would imagine your open rate is ridiculously high on that, right? Do you have any stats off top hand, or no problem?
I don't have stats because it's hard to tie when they're using it or not. But basically, we've gotten appointments from it. We've gotten people who actually pick up the phone because of it, and we haven't gotten people who are like annoyed by it because they do it in the right way. And so it's sometimes you're trying to leverage the EA to put you on the phone with them, but that's even a bigger ask in some ways, right? Whereas they walk over and they ask, just curious if you got it. So, it's something that a few of my reps have used successfully, and I thought that it's a pretty creative thing, and we've advocated for the rest of our team to use it as well.
Now, the only thing that would go with that is there's a certain size of company where that would be practical, but not, in my business here at VanillaSoft, I don't believe that we have anybody who performs that role, so it wouldn't be possible. But I'm going to assume you're talking about most likely enterprises, that type of thing.
Listen, it doesn't work everywhere too, because a lot of people are remote as well, right? But yeah, it depends on the size of the company, but also the level of person that you're going after. A coordinator isn't necessarily going to have an executive assistant, right? But they're also a lot easier to get on the phone. So a lot of times with the C-level or VP level, it works really well. And those are harder people usually to get on the phone. So it's a good tactic to use in those cases.
So now I'm interested. I'm going to assume there's an amount of times where they say, "Okay, cool. Yeah, I got the email," or "Yeah, I'll reply to it." It's one strand. Or you have, "Yeah, put them through." You put them through. You take the connect call out of preference, wouldn't you?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So if they'll put us through, we want to get people on the phone. That's our ultimate goal. So that is that, and that happens a lot with this strategy. But also, they'll at least reply, or they'll tell the EA that they're not interested, right? And we'd much rather really have somebody read an email and say no than keep on calling them back, because we could be prospecting into new people.
Yeah, or at least the intel gather as well. Why no? I just wanted to understand that type of thing. It's for you as the vendor in the relationship, you're getting market intel, but also the client's just getting a bad prospect, bad time, maybe in a year's time, but we'll move on to somebody else. So, I like it. Is there any other kind of scenario that plays out with that?
So there is a scenario, and it's going to filter into our third discussion, though, is that if they are, and we'll talk about it more in that too, but if they are, feel like they're not the right person, or, even if they say they're not interested and you've got that relationship with the EA, you want to ask for a referral or somebody else within the organization that you can speak to. And that is really, really powerful. And so, then that can come up a lot too. And so it's really important to be able to continue to engage and get a little bit of intel, like you said, in that scenario.
Right. So I would assume you either go top down and you say, really senior person of whatever job, we'd like to talk about A, B, and C, pain point, value prop, etc. And then you get the blessing to talk about it. Or you get something like you approach the same person and you hear, yeah, okay, talk to my marketing person or insert other function. And you're kind of seeking, I don't know if you have a word for this, but I would call it something like executive blessing. You're trying, you want to get it in such a way that you can say then to the second person, they told me to talk to you so that, like, listen, I'm not cold here, because you kind of are, but you're trying a little bit to say, no, they told me that this is on the radar and that I should now continue this with you, please. So how, I imagine that happens a little bit, but how often do you bump into that?
Yeah. So there's two scenarios like you broke down. One is both are gold. Referrals are gold. But one is titanium. I don't know. It's better than gold.
Let's go platinum. I don't know.
So, the platinum is if you can get a little bit of a nugget that this is on their radar, but they're not the right person, right? That this is something that they're thinking about in the organization, because then you've identified pain, and you know that there's something there. And the more you can talk to that person about that, the better. Because then you can leverage that you understand that there is this issue at the organization. Bill, Jane told me to speak to you about it. And that is, there very rarely are you not going to get a callback or somebody who's engaged with you, because you both you understand the pain and you've been told by somebody who's above them that they should speak to you about it. So that's the platinum standard. But even just getting a referral and saying, it's just not something that we deal with, or, I have somebody who deals with this for me, you got to ask them about it, is also gold, because then you have legitimacy. They feel like they should be speaking to you. Most likely they will return your call, or they'll engage with you because you have spoken to somebody else in the organization. And it can even be bidirectional. It doesn't have to be somebody above them, but anybody within the organization. If you've got a bit of a referral, you have a much better chance of engaging and having a conversation with that person. So, the language, it's pretty, Jane Doe, told me that I should be speaking with you. They said that, you have purview over X, Y, Z. And the more details you can put in there, the more of a chance that you have of really engaging with that prospect.
So it sounds a little bit like we've bled into our third topic. So shall we switch gears into it? That's perfect. This is a perfect little ebb. It's like we planned it as such.
I know, right?
Potentially. So paraphrase a little bit here. You've mentioned a great phrase, which I now am going to copy. Thank you. Referral mode. When we don't have authority to switch into referral mode, which department would have authority, and then we go from there. So first of all, help us understand it a little bit. But the particular angle I'm curious more about is, what situations do we run into that? Do we run into this at a first conversation where we've got somebody on the phone and we're seeking what's the right way to deal with this? Or is it when you get to a no, or both, or something else? Help me understand.
Yeah, so it's through a conversation, and there's really two things that ways that we'd approach it. And first, again, with a mini step back, just to sort of think as you're thinking about your cadence and you're thinking about the outcomes. Obviously, the best outcome is to get somebody on the phone or to reply to an email that says that they're interested, they want an appointment, right? And that you've nailed it. But a lot of times that's not going to happen. And so I think that it's really important to think through the prism that the cadence isn't over when you've got the wrong person on the phone, or even if they say no. And we'll talk about the nuance of that in a moment. And so, because like we mentioned in the last portion here, that referrals are gold. And so even if you don't have, and so I think some of the things that we train our SDRs on is that the first goal is to try to get an appointment, but the second goal is to think about a referral, and that's going to continue the cadence in a different direction. So when somebody is talking and they're like, it's pretty easy when they say, I'm not the right person. This is not something I handle. Go into referral mode then. And so you first want to ask a few questions and see if they have any knowledge around this and whether it's an initiative, because the more you can get pain from that person and understand things, that's great. A lot of times, if they're legitimately not the right person, they won't. But then you want to just ask, so what department, who does oversee this at your organization? Okay, great. So this is in, sales ops, right? Who are some of the folks that you think, might be the best person to contact with this, and try to get not just a name, but a few names if you can. Write them down and then ask, could you transfer me over? Because if you get an internal transfer, the more likely that person's going to pick up the phone. But then a lot of times you won't get them. And then you have 1 to 3 people that you start a cadence with, and it's a referral cadence, right? It's got to be different. You don't want to start with cold, because you now have a little nugget of gold that's either just the person who told me that, I should speak to you. And that's legit, right? But then also, if you have a little piece of pain, if you got some information that you can cite, and so your cadence goes into a different direction. So I would say you always want to have a referral cadence as well, because that's going to be different than your initial cadence. If you start the regular cadence again cold, you've lost the gold, right? If you're now not citing those. So that's, I think the big thing there now, and the most typical thing. The other part is that sometimes people reflexively say no. They don't say, I'm necessarily not the right person. They'll just say, no, not interested. So just probe a little bit. First, probe around pain just to make sure that it is a no, but then you can also probe around, are they the right person? Because maybe they're saying no because they're not the right person. And then you can get a referral again that way.
Yeah, quite often, for some reason, I'm asked about events all the time. Lead lists from particular industry events, sponsoring ones in the future, completely irrelevant industry events that I would never have any need to sell to, but are we going to be there and have a 50-foot booth and all that kind of stuff? No. I don't plan events and spend the money. No relevancy is another thing. But had they asked somebody else, some of them, I might have said, yeah, but talk to A, B, and C or X, Y, and Z, right? So there's definitely a bit of that. How often would you say that is part of this? I would imagine it's probably about half the time, because it's just very much part of, you reach out cold, particularly on the phone, and people they can be averse to talking regardless. So that's got to be a part of it. How much would you say that is?
That they're just the wrong person? Is that?
Yeah, because you're looking for, okay, so who, but how much is it just, I'm getting a no, not because the right person, it's just they would prefer to not speak now anyways.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people just reflexively say no. They realize it's a cold call. They tune people out, and then they just say no, and they didn't even really hear you. It could have been something that really could completely change your life, but they didn't hear you. So, and we train around that. We do a little bit, that's a whole nother webinar, but we do a little bit of a pattern interrupt to try to get them engaged to really listen to you beforehand. But still, reflexively, people are going to say no. And that's why it's good, even when somebody says no or send me info, those are all things that just they're reflexively saying. It's really important to train around, to ask a few questions so that you can make sure it's a real no. Decide whether they are the right person or not, right? You don't want to keep following up with somebody if they're not the right person. And then if they're not the right person, get referred to the right person. Yeah.
So maybe a little bit of the pattern interrupt thing is the answer to my question that I've got here. But how much do you run into? Because if I'm going to refer to maybe my boss or somebody senior to me, there's a little bit of especially if I don't know the rep who I'm kind of referring up to them or around to them. There's a bit of my reputation on the line, as if this is like a bunch of crap, I look like a bit of an idiot for doing that. So how much can you preemptively try and prevent that? I don't know that you fully can. There's still just going to be it's interpretation, but is there a way that you can kind of polish and change how you deliver what you say before asking that?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So there's always going to be folks who don't want to refer over because it's their reputation. You got to respect that. Understand. But actually, the words you chose is really good, and I have found that it's in the way you deliver things. Right? If you sound like a sleazy salesperson, you're never going to get a referral because they're not going to want to pass you on to somebody else. But if you're respectful in the way that you have approached the call, if you have a good cadence, if you sound approachable, you sound likable, and a lot of it has to do even with the cadence. It's sometimes more how you say something than even what you say. You can gain that trust in a short period of time, at least to the threshold of referring you someplace else. And then also certain words that you use. Can you help me? Would you mind helping me? People at their core want to be helpful. I mean, it goes back to our first conversation, being helpful, right? And it's amazing how sometimes people just want to help you out if you sound like a good person. If you sound and you deliver something where you're steamrolling the person, you're talking over them, you don't get asked for a form of permission at the beginning of the conversation, they're not going to want to help you. So, and at the end of the day, there's no silver bullet in anything in life, right? But especially in what we do. And so what we talk about at SalesRoads is just increasing the percentage chance that something's going to happen, right? So the better that you deliver, the more respectful, the more times you ask for a referral, the greater chance you're going to get the referral. And those referrals, again, are gold. The conversions on those referrals are much higher than just a cold outreach. So you just want to increase your chances.
Yeah, goodwill is a big, big part. Anytime I've called somebody and I'm asking, hey, would you mind if I asked you a quick question, or could you help me out? I'm looking for something and I can't quite find it, or something to that effect. The guardrails come from here all the way down to here. The natural defensiveness doesn't exist because I'm seeking their help. Therefore, I'm not a threat. As such, I'm not going to waste time. I'm not going to be an annoyance. I'm just asking for help, and therefore they probably feel quite good about giving me some help. So that type of thing, just incrementally as you keep going. And as far as delivery, as you said, I know that saying that 100 times in a row, it might get a little bit, stale to some end, but I think it's all in your just personality. And can you deliver it slightly differently, have some tone tweaks, and can you mirror and reflect how the person answers the phone? If they sound energetic, then you can rise to that. But if you just steamroller people and you say, hi, David, I'm calling from VanillaSoft, and I'd like to talk to you about our sales engagement platform, and like really off super quick and cheesy salesperson-esque. God, that'll be boring after about 2 times, never mind 100. And the amount of times that people don't appreciate how you did it adds to how annoying that is. And all the time that that's happening, your style doesn't have that at all.
And here's, so 2 things. One, with the style, I think that some of our best reps, they have this slow, almost hypnotic cadence. A lot of times people are rushing because they want to get it all in. But the best thing is to be slow, have pauses, because you seem more approachable, and you're not steamrolling, and you're less is more. And I found that is really helpful. The other thing, going back to the referrals, and if you can say why you want something, people are more likely to give it to you. I mean, I think there was this old study, I think it's pretty famous, I can't remember where, they looked at people who, back when we used a lot of copy machines, stood in line in the copy machine, and one person wanted to cut in line in the copy machine, and they tried to see what their success rate was using one of 2 methodologies. One was, could I step in front of you to make a copy? And the other was, could I step in front of you to make a copy because I'd like to make a copy? And the folks who said, because I'd like to make a copy, were much more successful than those that just said, can I step in front of you? And of course they want to make a copy, right? It's not even like anything that means anything, but people like to know why. And so it's much more relevant in what we do, right? So if you're asking for a referral and say, could you give me a referral to XYZ, because I'd like to see if they have some challenges with generating more appointments for their sales team, or because they'd like to, build more pipeline for their sales team, you're giving that person a reason to help you because you're trying to help that person. And so always think about, giving that because in that referral, because first of all, just psychologically, even if you say, would you give me a referral because I'd like you to give me a referral, right? Is more effective. But if you can give them a reason why, your chances will go up.
I'd really respect it if somebody said, could you give me a referral because I'd like a referral? That like you laughed. I think that's funny. Probably a lot of people would laugh at that. But also I do, when you explain the study there, obviously it's meant to be kind of ridiculous. Yeah, of course I want to jump ahead to make a copy. What else am I doing at the copy machine? Right. But I think it's a little bit, again, that defensive mechanism. It's if without the context, you just say, why do you want to jump ahead? We're all in the queue. And then with it, you think, for some reason, up here, all I did was I went, well, maybe they're in a rush for some reason. I afforded them some random excuses that I made, which were positive, rather than like, what a douchebag. He wants to cut in front of me. Why is he doing that? No, join the back of the queue, buddy. Like I get irritated by it. So for some reason, just telling anyone anything for some reason allows for goodwill, which again, that's what we said. So that's a funny study. I'd not heard of that. I'd heard of similar. But next time I'm at the copy machine, thank you for the pro tip. I might use that one. Speaking of which, so I think we might be on to our last tip. Time has flown by, David, as it always does when we talk. So the breakup email. Now, a lot of people talk about this. I've had many discussions about these types of things. I think they were actually pretty cool, done in particular ways. Not always just, looks like we're breaking up, man. Trying to be funny, but it's not particularly funny. It's overused in that sort of very canned sense. But oftentimes a breakup email I have seen has become a feedback email, which I think has worked pretty well. We actually do that ourselves. The most of the time that we get a response in any cadence, if you see it from this sort of length, it's nearly always at the start and nearly always near the end. The middle is kind of lesser for some reason or another, but I think we start strong and we finish with a strong one too. So the feedback-esque breakup email is quite useful. And I think you could also twin that with referrals potentially. But I'd love to know what yours is, unless I've just given it away accidentally.
You did, but that's okay.
Webinar over.
No. Here's what we found is helpful. I do think the feedback one is great. I think that we've all seen the ones that have been just overused for forever, and I don't think any. I mean, I guess maybe they worked at the beginning. I don't think they work anymore. But I think, again, thinking in the mindset of referral, and again, the whole concept of today is how can you leverage people? How can you leverage other people in your cadence? And so if you haven't gotten through to somebody, hopefully you have a hypothesis as to a few other folks that might be good for you to speak to, either on their team or across different departments. And so we found that writing an email that says, maybe this isn't relevant to you, or you don't have time, but it appears that this person, or this person might be the right person for me to speak to. Do you mind pointing me in the right direction? And making sure that you say specific people, because then it's not just open-ended. And we found it's much more successful to cite different people. They'll either correct you or they'll say, yes, Bill is the right person. But it shows knowledge, it shows research, and and they already realize that you've got some information. So we found that is helpful. And then it goes back to our other thing that you now have a referral, right? And so thinking through that prism of how can I get a referral? How can I get a small advocate, it's to help me in my prospecting journey here.
Yeah, oftentimes that I've had so many examples. I'm sure you can think of a bunch, but just getting something obvious like, I'll tell you what, the one I'm going to mention, it was actually very funny. It was something like, we haven't been able to establish any contact, meaning I haven't engaged, whatever. Is that because you're a moose or you'd like to remain anonymous? Then I thought, okay, funny, but just like a gimmick joke at the end doesn't necessarily mean that I need to reply or that any of the message was therefore relevant. Or you've probably not even gained any insight should I reply. It's the reply I get is just not of note or yes. So you're not going to get a lot from that. And so many of them don't particularly get much. And to say no name if you're looking for the next person to refer to as well gives me that canned cadence to 1,000 people at the same time, doesn't know anything about me. And that's just mainly, if I get on the phone with this person, will it be of any value or benefit at all? If they don't know anything about me, probably not. So that's like the mental math I've done super quickly there. I think a lot of people do that subconsciously. If you were to email me and say, we'd like to speak to you guys about something, who should we talk to? I think, well, you've taken the time to find out who I am and email me and ask me. Couldn't you find the right person or have a guess? And if I was asking you and I'd said, you know what, it would be nice to talk to your SDR team, maybe these two people, if you think they're appropriate, ? And then you're either going to go, yep, because I've done the work for you, or you're going to go, I actually know because you have more context than I, and you'll pick two people because it looks like it's a friendly ask. It's not just everyone's been asked the same thing. So there's quite a lot of psychology to that, I think.
Yeah, and here's the other thing that happens behind the scenes sometimes is they might not, like you said, might not want to sacrifice their reputation and tell you, but they might forward the email to those three people and say, is this something that you might be interested in? And again, you've got a human doing your in that company doing your adding to your cadence, right? And doing a cadence step for you. And then if it is relevant to them, they're definitely going to read that email now, right? And if it's relevant, they'll reply.
Totally. We didn't plan this, but since I did the anonymous anecdote there, I just wanted to ask you, have you had any funny emails like that come through recently? Just top of your head? If not, no problem. But that's that one I keep thinking of for some reason.
I have not, and that shows you how bad emails have gotten, because I'm getting a lot more emails. So some should be funny and cut through the clutter, but shows you the state of email these days.
Yeah. Have you had many of those insert vendor customer list subject lines? I get that daily.
I can't tell you how many times I'm prospected by sales outsourcing, B2B appointment setting and lead generation companies that say as their number one value prop that we curate lists, targeted lists for you to go after your ICP. I'm like, dude.
So how many have you
that's not the case if you're emailing me, because I'm not in your ICP. That's for sure.
Yeah, that is horrifying to think. Really, how good is your customer work? Actually, that's not good. Okay, cool. Well, we're through our agenda today, sir. So I appreciate this. Is there any other things that have come to mind as we've been talking that you want to bring up before we wrap?
No, I mean, I'd like to just sort of summarize. I think we think cadences. We think, okay, we're going to have 8 steps. We're going to have the best messaging, the best calls, and all those things. And I think that obviously that's great. But I think the more you can think through the prism of, how can I incorporate other people into my cadence? How can I be, do something that's different than just selling to that prospect, being helpful? What are little things that are a little different than just a moose joke, right? That can help you to stand out and get your attention, because it's really hard to get attention these days. I do still think over the phone it's easier now because there's so many emails. So that's why it's really important that I think make sure that the phone is part of your cadence, but think about ways to incorporate different folks within the organization as part of your cadence in creative ways like we've discussed today.
Perfect. Okay, so that sees us roughly to time. I think we all need to move on to our next call. We'll go and get a drink or whatever else we need to do. But before we go, of course, as usual, I'd like to make sure that we thank everybody who stayed the course. Well done to you. You have a very good attention span, much better than myself. So congratulations. We'd appreciate any comments or questions that you might have. So in a second, we'll do David and I's contact information so that you can send us those things. You can say, Ollie, you sucked, and David, you're great, or something nice to both, should you feel like it. So David, again, as always, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming on. Always have some good wisdom to share. I can always ask you, hey, what are you thinking about at late? And then you come up with a few points and here we are talking about them. So this is always good fun. Thank you for that. What's new on your radar? What have you got to promote and tell people about, and where can people find you?
Yeah, well, thanks again, Ollie. It's always great chatting, and I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, so I'm active on LinkedIn. So just you can find me there, David Kreiger. You can ping me, shoot me a message, any questions, thoughts, and then obviously I'm president of SalesRoads, so you can find us online at SalesRoads. But again, thanks, Ollie, for having us and having me here. I always enjoy the conversation.
Our pleasure, and I'll vouch for David's LinkedIn. I think the word is carousels I'm looking for. Always posting them, always good. Take a look and then give them a follow there if you haven't already. And for me, very similarly, I'm on LinkedIn. If you can spell my last name correctly, you can find my email. It's ollie.whitfield@vanillasoft.com. Beyond that, I'm pretty much on LinkedIn. And I think I'm one of the only Ollie Whitfields that there are. Lucky me. Good branding. Anyways, so that's it for the show. Of course, it's always good fun to do this. Let me know if you have any comments, questions, ideas, thoughts, cries of anguish, anything else, and ideas for the next topic that you'd like to see us do. The recording will be with you soon if it's not already. So please do have a watch of that and share it with anyone you want to. And again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one, guys. Thanks very much.